You are listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin, supported by Rafa, celebrating the sport and producing the finest cycling clothing since 2004.
Hello, my name's Richard Moore. I'm with Orla Chennaoui.
Hello, Richard.
And Orla, this is episode 6, I think, of the Cycling Podcast Féminin.
Yeah, we've made it this far. We've survived.
We're into the winter. This month's episode, we're going to talk a bit about retirement here, not our own. But a lot of high-profile female riders retiring this year. There seems to be a sort of changing of the guard a little bit. And you've spoken to one of them, haven't you?
Yeah, I spoke to Mara Abbott, who won that agonising 4th place at the Rio Olympics.
She won 4th place. That's a very... I know you like to put a positive spin on things. And I know you're fired up and ready to go.
I'm fired up.
Because we're talking on the day of the American election, so the result will be known by the time this goes out. But we're fired up and ready to go, aren't we?
Yeah. We did a little warm-up before this podcast this morning, watching one of President Obama's speeches where he told everybody about getting fired up. You ready to go? We're ready to go.
That on top of some energy balls and double macchiatos.
I think I've had 3 double coffees this morning. Yeah, I think I was saying before we got started, we better start before I crash because I'm a little bit hyper right now, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, back to Mara Abbott.
Mara Abbott and her triumphant 4th place in the Olympic road race.
Oh, go away. So what I meant was she finished in that agonising 4th place at the Rio Olympics. And it's not for nothing that I said that she won, because I think during that race, certainly, she was looking nailed on for the win after that unfortunate crash by Annemiek van Vleuten. Wasn't to be, a couple of 100 metres to go before the line, and she was overtaken once, twice, thrice. Finished in 4th, wrote a wonderful article in the Wall Street Journal about it afterwards, describing that agony, really, of being so close, losing out, what it meant. And she's had a really fascinating journey, I think, through cycling as well. She's battled anorexia. She's had to deal with the lack of finances involved while she's racing in Europe. She is American. So it was great to catch up with her and chat to her about what life holds in store next.
She's a very interesting woman, very interesting interview. I also interviewed the woman who finished second in that race in Rio, Emma Johansson, the Swede, who has really been a pioneer of women's professional cycling in the last 10 years. 5-time Swedish road race champion, 5-time Swedish time trial champion, but probably better remembered for her near misses. She was second in the road race in Beijing in 2008. She's finished in the medals in the World Road Race Championship as well, but never quite got that big win. But nevertheless, she can look back on a great career, and she's stepping down 2017. She'll still race, but at a lower level with Wiggle High Five. So I spoke to her. At the other end of the age spectrum, I spoke to Jessie Walker as well, the 22-year-old British rider, daughter of Chris Walker, who was a really, really talented rider in the 90s in Great Britain and America, actually. But she's returned home from Italy, and a very disappointing and unfortunate experience with an Italian team, and probably says quite a lot about the state of women's professional cycling for a lot of riders. And she's stopped for the moment. She'll hopefully come back at some point. But anyway, I caught up with her at the Ruler Classic, and we're going to hear in the first part actually from Laura Trott, who you spoke to, Orla, at the Ruler Classic.
I did, and I made that very same mistake, Richard, because she's now Laura Kenny, isn't she?
Oh yeah, Laura Kenny. Oh, it's confusing, this, isn't it?
It's not really. It's quite easy. Although, I did make that mistake when I was talking to her. But yeah, Laura Kenny these days.
So it's not that
Kenny.
easy.
No, it's not that easy.
Before any of that, let's hear quickly from the Finnish rider Lotta Lepistö, who...
Speaking of names, that's a good one.
That's a good one, isn't it? Negligently failed to mention her bronze medal in the World Road Race Championship in Qatar last month when we were reviewing the World Road Race Championships. And one of our Finnish listeners wrote in, and he was finished with the podcast, I think, because he was disappointed that we didn't give any mention at all to Lotta Lepistö. So here she is. Okay, Lotta, well, thank you very much for speaking to us. As you know, we neglected to give you the credit that you deserve for your bronze medal in the World Road Race Championship, so please accept our apologies, first of all.
Yeah, for sure. I will. It's okay. It's fine.
We're forgiven. Speaking about the road race, on reflection, a few weeks later, what does it mean to you to have won a bronze medal there?
Yeah, well, of course, I was a little bit disappointed because I wanted to win. That was my goal, to win. But also, I'm really happy about the bronze medal because it's the first medal for Finland ever in road racing. So I'm really proud of that.
Did it get a lot of attention back home in Finland?
Yes, actually, I just got the invitation from the president to his castle for the Independence Day. So the media has been really interested now about this result.
Great. When are you going to the president's castle?
It's going to be next month in December, 6th of December. It's the Independence.
You're back home in Finland just now. So what's the next? What's the winter hold for you? When do you return to sort of sunnier climes and to start training again? Presumably after you've been to the president's castle.
Yeah, well, so next week I will go to back to South Africa, make one race, and then I start my training there, and then I come back to Finland for 1 week, and then I will go back to Spain, to Girona, and start training there.
And big goals next year, apart from the World Championships in Norway, is there anything else where we should look out for you?
Spring Classics, for sure, like Trente and Flanders. I want to be there in the first position.
Great. Well, we'll be looking out for you, and we'll be very conscious of our audience in Finland, who will be listening out for us to give you full credit where it's deserved.
Yeah, cool. That's nice.
You are listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin, supported by Rafa, celebrating the sport and producing the finest cycling clothing since 2004.
So that was Lotta Lepistö. Sorry again, Lotta, for not mentioning you in last month's podcast, but, we would like to make amends. We're open
very diligent of you, Richard.
Well, it was an oversight, and certainly a great moment for Finnish cycling. There aren't a lot of good Finnish cyclists or Finnish cyclists on the world stage, so credit where it's due. And just keep if we're missing anybody else out, just let us know, and we'll try and get in touch with them.
Please get in touch. Yeah, well, we do read all the tweets actually, and try to reply when we can. So yeah, keep it coming.
As I said at the start, this is a retirement episode. That's the sort of theme to this first off-season episode, but a slightly different element to this first part, because you met Laura Kenny,
good boy,
at the Ruler Classic recently, where you were hosting it. Orla.
You're having real. Do you want one of my energy balls?
Laura. You were hosting it. It was 3 days. There were a lot of stars there. You also spoke to Megan Garnier there, who's the first winner of the Women's World Tour. You should have heard that interview in last week's regular cycling podcast. So that was from the Ruler Classic as well. But was it a good event over the few days? You were pretty busy.
Yeah, it was really good. We had lots of big names there, a good turnout. What was really encouraging, I think, was just how busy it got whenever we had good names on stage and people really keen to hear their stories. Laura Kenny, Jason Kenny in particular, the room, you couldn't hear a pin drop, or you could have heard a pin drop rather. The other one. I had too much caffeine. But yeah, it was really good, and they were just fantastic. It's quite funny. I asked them on stage about what it's like that they're doing these tours together, if you like, because of course their achievements are very individual. Their training, their performance, very individual, and yet they seem to be quite happy to market themselves as a couple. And I asked them whether there was a comfort in that, really, and sort of having someone by your side to absorb some of it whenever you can't really be bothered. And I don't think they've really thought about it too much, to be honest. I think now that they're a married couple, they spend all their time together anyway, that they're happy to just go around. They've written a book together. And they seem happy to, I guess, appear as a bit of a double act in a way.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah, they have written a book together, and that's out very soon. I hope I'm not breaking any confidence when I say I think there was a lot more publisher interest in a Laura Kenny knee Trott. Laura Kenny Trott.
Not convoluted at all.
Book than a Laura and Jason book. Because Laura Trott is somebody who has really amassed a huge following, I suppose, in a way that Jason Kenny, despite all his gold medals, has not. His personality is not really broken through in the same way that Laura Trott's has.
Yeah, it hasn't done yet. Laura is just such a bubbly, personable, excitable, dare I say, character.
She's a real person, isn't she?
Yeah, and she is very honest as well, I think, and there are no filters. She's not trying to create any kind of a persona. She just is who she is, and that's really refreshing, and I think that's why people warm to her. Jason is just a little bit shyer, I think, although I have to say at the Real Hour Classic event, when we had both of them on stage, he really seems to be starting to come into his own. Everyone I spoke to afterwards said it's the best that they had seen him. I think he's becoming a little bit more comfortable now in the role, and he's probably learning a little bit from Laura as well, and seeing how she can work a crowd and picking things up from her. And marriage tends to settle a man, doesn't it, as well? If only faces were portrayable in some way on podcast, Richard. That was quite a grimace that you gave me just now.
Yeah, we shouldn't be talking about male cyclists, of course. That should be banned, but I brought them up.
Yeah, you did bring them up. And actually, when it was a bit of an awkward moment backstage afterwards, when I'd asked for a quick chat with Laura for this podcast, and Jason came along as well, and I had to say, sorry, Jason, it's just Laura, because it's a women's cycling podcast. So he quite rightly questioned whether that was a bit sexist. So I said, well, it might be, but I'm only interested in Laura, and off we went. But it was quite all right.
Well, let's hear from her. Here she is.
So we're here at backstage, if you like, at the Real Hour Classic, where Laura Trott, sorry, I've done it, Laura Kenny, has just been on stage with her new husband, Jason. Laura, how was that? How is it presenting yourself as a married woman these days, or does it make any difference whatsoever?
No, I don't think it makes any difference. I'm sort of getting used to it myself, actually. Somebody rode up alongside me, some guy, like we were literally out separately on the bikes, and he rode up alongside me and was like, oh, you Laura Kenny? And I was like, Laura who now? And then I was like, oh no, really, that's me. And I was like, you're the first person to actually call me that. So yeah, I'm still getting used to it. And also with my autograph as well, because I've changed it to Laura Kenny. And the other day at Pride of Britain, I signed Laura Trott, and I was like, oh, hang on, that's not my name anymore.
So you mentioned Pride of Britain, a little insight into how your life's been, I guess, since Rio. You've been invited to so many glitzy, glamorous things. How's that all been?
Mad, but like good mad. Like we're really enjoying it. I think after London 2012, because we got invited to a lot of stuff then, but we sort of didn't take people up on the offers because we just kind of threw ourselves back into cycling. For me personally, that's all I've ever done. So I didn't really know that there was this other world that you could kind of get involved in. Whereas this time I was like, I'm going to take a step back, because I do feel like I kind of rushed into it a little bit after 2012 and just started racing again, and then all of a sudden my Olympic cycle started. Whereas this time I'm like, right, I'm going to take an actual break. So I had 4 weeks completely off when we were on honeymoon, and that's the longest I've ever had off. So this time, yeah, like I say, we've been doing like fun things, and going to Pride of Britain was literally incredible. It kind of made you realise like much an effect that people have on your life, and it was just incredible to see like what I call true heroes. For us it was weird. I almost felt like we almost didn't deserve to go up on stage, because you've got people who have saved people's lives, or I've literally done some like incredible things. So for us it was like, oh, all I actually do is ride my bike. So it kind of felt weird, but yeah, it's been great to kind of get involved in that kind of side of things.
And yet you are now a hero, heroine to lots of kids growing up, and I would think probably girls in particular. When you were growing up, there wasn't really so much of that scene, maybe Victoria Pendleton, but certainly not the dominance that we see now. Are you aware of that and your influence on younger girls, like a younger Laura Trott, if you like?
I would say, yeah, now I am really kind of more aware of it. I think after 2012, like people would say, oh, you're kind of an idol, but I don't think it was until after Rio that I kind of thought, oh, no, I really do have an effect on these people. And I tried to make, in our book as well, I tried to make a point of like explaining certain things that, you know, girls and women have to go through, like on the bikes, like periods, for example. And I wanted to be as kind of honest as I could be in the book about it, because to me that's really important. I think when I grew up, I didn't have that kind of, like there was no examples of that. Like I went through like the talent team programs, and like we got scouted through the British Cycling Cycle, and there was no sort of education on it. And unless you were brave enough to kind of speak to your peers about it, you didn't really know anything. So I really wanted to try and put that across and show that, you know, we all go through these kind of difficult times, and you can get out of it and you can get through it. Because I think for me, that could have held me back, and I chose to not let it hold me back. But there will be girls who will be like, I can't do this, and might be able to read the book and think, oh no, actually, hang on, everybody does go through it. So I guess, yeah, it has become a lot more important to me because I've always wanted to give back to cycling. So to be an inspiration, I guess, is what I want to try and do.
It's interesting that you mention that and the female specific element of being an athlete, because you are a role model. You know, it's something, I guess, it's foisted upon you whether you ask for it or not. Is it important for you to be a specifically female role model, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can relate a lot more to the female side of things, and also there's very few of us. I mean, obviously since Rio, so many of the female athletes did great, and I think that's really good and really important for that kind of next generation coming through to kind of inspire them into sport. But I think because sport is seen to be quite a male-dominant kind of area, I guess there's a lot more male athletes than there are female. So I do feel that it's quite important for me to kind of not be a figurehead as such, but be out there as this female role model, because like I say, a lot of girls, like I've been part of a campaign with Always, and their statistic was just, I couldn't believe it. It was 67% of girls drop out of sport between the age of puberty, so that's 14 to 15 year olds, and I couldn't believe that. So for me, it's about getting that number down, and so if people do see me more of a female role model, then yeah, I do want to be that.
I want to bring you back to Rio, Laura, if you don't mind, and that phenomenal success that you had there. Watching you in the track, well, at a big event, you seem so confident, so happy, almost like there isn't any doubt that you're going to win. Was there a doubt that you would do as incredibly well as you did?
Yeah, there's always a doubt. I mean, I've got that kind of personality where I'm constantly doubting myself. If you could read some of the messages on my little family WhatsApp group that we have going back and forward, and the amount of stress that there is sometimes. Like I can't remember what event. I think it might have been. Oh, it was after the scratch race. So after the scratch race, obviously Sharikova, the Belarusian, had taken a lap and she'd got the maximum points. And now in my head, because the last time I'd done an IP against her was at Cali World Cup, I'm thinking, and she beat me there, and I was thinking, well, now she's going to beat me in that event, and then she's good at elimination races and she'll beat me in that event. And so I'm texting my dad like, help, like I can't deal with this, like what am I going to do if she puts me away in all the events? And they're like, you're literally ridiculous sometimes, Laura, like think logically for once, and you're in the form of your life. So no, there was doubt. I think once I got to the second day though, I was a lot more comfortable, and once I got to the points race as well, like not to sound big-headed or whatever, but I was confident by that point. I had a 24-point gap, and all I had to do was make sure nobody took a lap on me, so it was quite a nice kind of position to be in, I guess.
It is wonderful that you have won an Olympic gold in every final that you've been in. Is that also though a big pressure?
Well, I guess when I go to Tokyo, if I go to Tokyo, I mean, I've actually got to get selected. So, like, since obviously competing at the Olympics, like the younger squad, like the younger girls coming through, have literally taken off. They won a World Cup in Glasgow. So I've got to get back in the team first before I can even try and get a clear run. But yeah, I mean, obviously you dream, don't you? As a little girl, I dreamed that I wanted to be Olympic champion. Quite whether I thought I would go to the Olympics and not have lost yet, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, obviously if I was that little girl again, then she would probably dream that she would carry on doing that for the rest of her career.
So if that is the dream then, to get to Tokyo and try to keep that unblemished record, how do you foresee that path panning out, or is it too early to say?
I mean, I would say it's too early in terms of like a fixed plan. Like the World Championships this year, obviously the first ones in Hong Kong, that I guess everybody will wonder whether I'm going to. And for me, it's not putting pressure on myself too soon. I've spoken to Paul, my coach, about it, and it really is about kind of just getting back into it and really enjoying it again. Like, not that I didn't enjoy it pre-Rio, but it can be stressful. Like before the Olympics, just little things like my form wasn't there and I'm just waiting for it to turn up, and everyone's like, it will be there on the day, and you're thinking, is it though? Is it? But that's what we kind of train for. We train for that end kind of day, like that kind of, well, I mean, I say one day, but obviously mine's spread over 5 days. You kind of train for those 5 days. So the only time, if you've perfected it, you'll see it is then. So it is stressful. So it's quite nice for me to be able to step back now and then kind of reset and restart. So yeah, what the next 4 years holds, I don't know. And like I say, I've actually got to get selected again for the Olympics. But yeah, if I wanted to dream, then I'd say I'd be in Tokyo. Yeah.
If you look back to post-2012, you did a stint on the road with considerable success, national champion in 2014, beating the then Lizzie Armitstead. But I get the impression the road is not where your heart lies. Do you think that will change in any way? Can you see yourself attempting anything on the road in the next couple of years?
I really don't know. I mean, I would have to learn it, I think, is my big issue. Like I said earlier, I mean, it's kind of spending time with 200 girls on some pretty narrow roads honestly freaks me out. Like 25 on the track and with no brakes is fine. Like, I love that. Get me on the road with brakes. No, honestly, it terrifies me. And I think it would be me having to learn it all over again. And then obviously enjoying it after that, because that's when it's stressful, is when like you don't really know what you're doing. And so it's the uncertainty that I guess puts me off a little bit. So yeah, right now, if you were to ask me, I'd say no. I really don't want to go on the road. But like I say, I never planned to be national champion that time. I didn't enjoy road very much then either, and it kind of just happened. So I guess you never know.
What's fantastic, I think, about your career, though, is that before, I guess, young cyclists coming through would have thought that if they wanted a career, an actual professional career on two wheels, it would have to be on the road. And now you and the generation of riders with you have shown that you can do it on the track as well. Yeah, definitely. And that's great to see. It's great to see, like, obviously, when I first started, like I say, like when I went to school and I was like, oh, I've been on a velodrome. Nobody had a clue what a velodrome was. So now it's nice that, you know what, this sport is huge and it's really taken off. And like you say, you can actually have a professional career on the track. And for me, that's great, because that is where I enjoy it the most. Like, I love being in that kind of... I don't know whether it's because you feel like you're closer to the action and you feel like you're there with your supporters and your fans, because it is all enclosed. I don't know, but yeah, I love it. I just love the buzz and I love the energy in there.
So that was a literally ridiculous Laura Kenny. Literally ridiculous. Quite hard to say that, actually, but she managed it well.
She did. Isn't it just wonderful listening to her? She puts a smile on my face. She's got such energy, such enthusiasm. I like that she's not rushing back into competition again anytime soon, because you'd want her to be able to keep enjoying it, because that is obviously in competition anyway. That's what she has over her rivals. She just seems to have such enormous fun. And what I really liked about chatting to her as well is that often when athletes get to a certain level of success, I mentioned her being a role model and how that sort of imposed upon athletes whether they wanted or not. But she's someone who, despite her bubbliness or on top of it, seems to have a very sensible head on her shoulders as well. And it's something that she takes very seriously. And I like that she is very conscious of that and is keen to give something back and is keen to inspire young girls, because that's exactly the kind of role model you need, someone who embraces that and takes it on board. I think Laura Kenny's just fantastic.
Interesting what she said about road racing, because for most people the track is a stepping stone to road. Maybe not so much for women riders, because there aren't the rewards on the road that there are for men, and so there's maybe more, you know, an Olympic medal is the pinnacle, whether you're a road rider or a track rider in women's cycling. So, you know, on the track she can win 2 Olympic gold medals, and she's done that twice now. And so the road perhaps isn't an attractive or you know, even something that would be worth her while doing. And it was interesting to hear her sort of admit there to her fear when she rides a road race, that she finds it quite a terrifying prospect. I wonder what the sort of women's peloton makes of her success, because she's an endurance rider like them, but she's just chosen to focus on something else. There's traditionally, certainly men's cycling, a bit of snootiness, you know, between track and road. Yeah, or from road towards track. There is, and I think that is partly, as you alluded to, the difference between how the road peloton is seen in men and women's cycling. I mean, if you look at any of the household names that we have in women's cycling, yeah, you've got Lizzie Deignan, but other than that, you're really looking at the likes of Victoria Pendleton, track, Laura Kenny, obviously, Joanna Russell-Shand. Danny King has made that transition across to the road, but there aren't the same incentives, there aren't the same rewards as there are in men's cycling. And the track, certainly, if it's not where it's at, you know, where success is measured in women's cycling, it's certainly at the very least on a par with road, if not maybe above in this country anyway. Absolutely. And, you know, there's another reason why I think she's suited to the track, and it's something you alluded to. It's the fun that she has, but also the energy seems to draw from a crowd. You know, I've seen her compete in Glasgow, actually, at a World Cup, you know, and it was that, relatively speaking, quite low key, really, although it was a capacity crowd. And I've never seen anybody respond to a crowd in the way that she does, and as I say, draw energy, and especially in a race like the elimination race, which she's so good at. She really seems to get the crowd on her side and draw this energy from it herself. There's a real interaction there, a real synergy, dare I say. But there's this real connection that she makes with people, and it's partly because of her personality, bubbliness, etc. But the way she rides as well allows her to connect with people.
Yeah, and that's actually something she brought up on stage as well when I asked her the difference between track and road, and especially women's cycling, you can do kilometre after kilometre with nobody by the side of the road cheering you on, and she said she loves that cauldron of the atmosphere of a velodrome whereby, you know, every single second you're on display. Yeah, exactly. And I think she really enjoys that performance of it, and as you say, in the elimination race in particular, where the crowd are on their feet every time I've seen her race it, that really seems to give her the extra fun that she needs to be able to perform well.
You are listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin, supported by Rapha, celebrating the sport and producing the finest cycling clothing since 2004.
Thank you very much indeed to our sponsor, Rapha, who sponsored the Cycling Podcast and the Cycling Podcast Féminin. We wouldn't be able to do it without them. So thanks, Rapha. Now we're moving into our retirement phase, Orla.
We say that while lounging on my couch. It feels rather apt.
It does feel like that. I think we're going to hear from Mara Abbott first, the American rider who's recently retired. Evelyn Stevens is the other high-profile American rider who's just retired, also with a very interesting story. Maybe we'll speak to her for a future episode. Yeah. You caught up after some weeks of trying, I think. You spoke to Mara Abbott.
Yeah, I think just time differences and her being in a less structured phase of her life without the training and whatnot, it was a bit difficult for the both of us to catch up. But I eventually did. After a long day on the farm, Mara Abbott sat down and had a chat. So Mara, thank you for taking the time to chat to me. You've been a difficult woman to track down. You must be busy. What have you been up to?
You know, I don't know. It's a lot of it's sort of picking up loose ends because, especially during the season, but during any season, but during this season in particular, there's a lot of stuff I let slide. So like trying to pull my house back into order, trying to get back in touch with people that I haven't spoken to, in months. There's a lot of that. I work at a farm here, so I've been being able to spend more time out there, which has been really nice. And just sort of figuring out what is going to happen to me next.
Do you have any sort of a better idea about that, Mara? And can you explain to us just how difficult, I guess, a transition that is to go from years of structured training and racing to figuring out what's next?
I think that, one of the decisions I made early on was that you could set up, you could get a job in advance and you could say that you're going to do all these different things in advance. But the fact is, when you're making that large of a transition and you finish something as monumental as moving away from what's been your career, you don't know how you're going to feel. And I don't think that there's any way that you can know ahead of time how you're going to feel once the situation arrives. So to create a plan ahead of time seemed a little bit foolish potentially, and maybe just kind of a waste of time. And so it's absolutely a challenge because you're really taking sort of everything that you knew and dropping it, and there's a huge void. But I think that that's also a huge opportunity because, you look at the time like finishing college or finishing high school or whatever you did for school, or maybe if you move somewhere new, but that's usually going to involve some sort of a job or a rationale for that. And so really the opportunity when you're sitting there with your life and it's a complete blank slate, it's not exactly pleasant, but it's a huge opportunity to be able to craft what you want it to be.
Do you think it's made a little bit more difficult by the need to process what happened at the Rio Olympics when you were so close to certainly winning a medal and then finishing fourth? Coming to terms with that, has that made the transition into retirement a little bit more difficult, do you think?
I think probably it has. I think in the big picture, you look at that and you say, okay, well, even if I were still planning on racing for years, that's still going to be a huge thing to process, both a huge victory and a huge loss, and so that's always going to be something that's going to take a long time to process. But in this case, okay, you get down through that layer and then you have the next layer to process of looking at sort of where I'm going to go with my life next. And so maybe it delays it by a couple of weeks or it delays it by a month. But that's just something, I mean, you learn to process a lot of victories and failures. And so I think that a lot of people returning from the Olympics, whatever their result was, are also having an experience they're having to process.
Mara, you wrote the most beautiful article in the Wall Street Journal about your experience at the Rio Games. It was heartbreaking to read, and I would urge anyone who hasn't read it to take it in as an example, I think, of the brutality and the heartbreak that elite sport can involve. Do you still feel that heartbreak that you described in that article?
Well, I think that's why you call it heartbreak, you know, like if you're able to go through experiences and then like several months later, they have not had an influence on who you are as a person, you know, like I don't know how you're evolving. So everything that we go through shapes who we are, and the things that break our heart are things that are going to cause us to change and cause us to evolve, and they're going to shape who we are. And so those experiences are always going to be something that I'm going to have with me.
Is there any one part of that race that still replays in your mind these few months on?
No, not really.
None at all?
There's not one specific part, but also I don't want to sit there. I mean, the fact is the race is over. And I'm not going to sit there and make myself go over it in my mind over and over and over again, you know? I mean, sure, you'll think about stuff, but there's not some part that sticks out.
Do you take contentedness, satisfaction from how you rode that race?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's a huge part of what I talk about, both in that article and in the TED Talk that I've given. I gave a TED Talk here in Boulder a couple of weeks ago. It was both a thrilling and a disappointing result, but I was so proud of how I rode the race, and if I'm going to be able to be proud of my last race as a professional, I'm fairly lucky. So,
a TED Talk, that's quite cool. How did that go?
I don't know. You guys will have to watch it and let me know what you think.
You have had incredible success through your career, and I guess it hasn't been an easy career. I'm not sure if anyone retiring at this stage in women's cycling can have had an easy career. I mean, money's always been an issue. How do you think the sport has evolved since you started in it?
I think it's hard to say. You know, the last year there was a lot of change coming online with the new Women's World Tour. And so I would say up until last year, it had actually sort of been on a not severe, but a slight downward trend, that we were losing races and losing teams. And, you know, you've been in the sport for 10 years and there hasn't been a real increase in salaries or in support. And so initially, I would say it was going downhill, and not like it was dropping off a cliff, but it was just like every year you'd lose a little bit more. One race would just disappear and nothing would come back in. So a lot of people are talking about what a big difference the Women's World Tour is going to make. And I think that definitely last year we were able to get some more coverage. I also think that we've been able to get a little bit more coverage just because of social media and, you know, streaming on computers and ways that the world in general is more interconnected and obscure things are more accessible. So I think that looking at the World Tour and looking at those sorts of developments, that's something that you're not going to be able to tell in its first year, because the question is whether that's going to help the sport to evolve. So it's started, and we'll sort of see where it goes from there. If it ends up being just, you know, another colored jersey that someone gets to wear, then that's not what we're going for. But if they are able to achieve some of the goals that they've set out for bringing more notice to women's cycling through that sort of an event, then we'll see.
And Mara, I mentioned the huge success you've had in your career, 2-time winner of the Giro, for example, but also the battles that you've had to come through. You've come through anorexia, for example. I hope you don't mind me mentioning that. Do you look back on your sport and your sporting career with fondness? Do you still love the sport? How do you feel about it?
I don't know if fondness is really the right word. I mean, for me, cycling was never a fondness thing, you know? You're doing it because, I mean, honestly, any professional, you're not doing it because it's fun and fuzzy. You're doing it because you want to be the absolute very best that you can be. And that's not actually an easy, fun thing to be all of the time. And it's not an easy world to live in. And cycling culture in general isn't a terribly emotionally supportive place, I don't think. And so, no, it's not like a warm and fuzzy fondness, but I'm proud of who I became, and I'm proud of what I accomplished. And there are some relationships that I made that have been the greatest relationships of my life. And so in that way,